Welcome back for another Summer Blockbuster. This summer, I'm going behind the scenes of some of the biggest summer blockbuster movies. If you're new here, welcome. Each week, I create new look using Color Street nail strips, and this summer, join me and go behind the scenes to see how these movies were made. If you're interested in unique color combos and want to learn some movie magic facts, I would highly recommend that you hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. In December 1992, Paramount Pictures execs approached Star Trek Next Generation producer Rick Berman and engaged him to create 2 feature films with the cast of the television series. Berman decided to develop 2 screenplays simultaneously and prioritize the most promising one first, which happened to be Generations. Paramount wanted Braga and Moore, who had written the Generations script and a number of the Next Generation episodes, to pen the screenplay. Berman told Braga and Moore that he wanted them to think about doing the story involving time travel. The writers, meanwhile, wanted to use the Borg. Right on the spot, we said maybe we could do both, the Borg and time travel. The Borg had not been seen in full force since the 4th season of The Next Generation and had never heavily been featured in the series due to budget constraints and the fear that they would lose their scare factor. The Borg were really liked by fans, Moore said. They were fearsome, they were unstoppable, perfect foils for a future story. In deciding to combine the 2 story ideas, the writers decided that the time travel element could play out as the Borg attempted to prevent humanity from ever reaching space and becoming a threat. One major question was identifying the time period which the Borg would travel. Berman's suggestion was the Renaissance. The Borg would attempt to prevent the dawn of modern European civilization. The first story draft, titled Star Trek Renaissance, had the crew of the Enterprise track the Borg to their hive in a castle dungeon. The film would feature sword fights along with phasers in 15th century Europe, while Data became Leonardo da Vinci's apprentice. Moore was afraid that it risked becoming campy and over the top, while Stewart refused to wear tights. Braga, meanwhile, wanted to see the birth of Star Trek, when Vulcans and humans first met. That, to me, is what made the time travel story fresh. The central story became Cochrane's warp drive test and humanity's first contact. Cochrane was placed in the mid-21st century Montana, where humans recovered from a devastating world war. The writers focused on the arc of Cochrane himself, making the ideal future of Star Trek come from a flawed man. The film was given a budget of $45 million, considerably more than Generations' budget of $35 million. This allowed the production to plan a large amount of action and special effects. The writers intended the film to be easily accessible for any moviegoer and to work as a standalone story, yet still satisfy the devoted Star Trek fans. Since much of Picard's role made a direct reference to his time as a Borg in the Next Generation episode, The Best of Both Worlds, the opening dream sequence was added to explain what happened to him in the show. While writers tried to preserve the idea of the Borg as a mindless collective in the original draft, the head of Paramount felt that the script was not dramatic enough. He suggested adding an individual Borg villain whom the characters could interact with, which led to the creation of the Borg Queen. Cast member Jonathan Frakes was chosen to direct. Frakes had not been the first choice to direct, but when Stewart met with potential candidates and concluded they did not know Star Trek, it was decided to stay with someone who understood Star Trek, and Frakes was given the job. Frakes directed multiple episodes of The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager, but First Contact was his first feature film. In preparation, he watched Jaws, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and works of James Cameron and Ridley Scott. The major concern during production was security. The script of Generations had been leaked online, and stronger measures were taken to prevent similar occurrence. The planned title of Resurrection was scrapped when 20th Century Fox announced the title of the 4th Alien film as Alien Resurrection. The film was rebranded First Contact on May 3, 1996. First Contact was the first Star Trek film to make significant use of computer-generated starship models. Though physical miniatures were still used for the most important vessels, with the Enterprise D destroyed during the events of Generations, the task of creating a new starship fell to veteran Star Trek producer-designer Herman Zimmerman. The script's only guide on the appearance of the vessel was the line, The new Enterprise sleekly comes out of the nebula. Working with illustrator John Aves, the designer conceived of the new Sovereign-class Enterprise E as leaner, sleeker, and mean enough to answer any Borg threat you can imagine. Working from blueprints created by Paramount's Rick Sternbach, the model shop at Effects House Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, fabricated a 10.5-foot miniature over a 5-month period. The model's panels were painted in alternating matte and gloss scheme to add texture. The crew had multiple difficulties in preparing the miniature for the filming. While Model Shop originally wanted to save time by casting the windows using fiberglass, the material came too tacky. ILM instead cut the windows using a laser. The film also required a number of non-Starfleet designs. The warp ship Phoenix was conceived by fitting inside an old nuclear missile. Aves made sure the emphasis on the mechanical aspect of the ship to show that it was highly experimental and untested technology. The Phoenix's cockpit labels came from McDonnell Douglas's space shuttle manuals. Aves considered the Vulcan ship a fun vessel to design. Only 2 major Vulcan ships have been previously seen on Star Trek, including the courier vessel from the motion picture. Since the 2-engine ship format had been seen many times, the artist decided to step away from the traditional ship layout, creating a more artistic than functional design. The ship incorporated elements of a starfish and a crab. Because of budget constraints, the full ship was realized as a computer-generated design, and only the boomerang-shaped landing foot was fabricated for the actors to interact with. Some existing sets were used to save money. Sickbay was redressed of the same location from Voyager, while the USS Defiant scenes used Deep Space Nine's standing set. Some set designs took inspiration from the Alien film series, Star Wars, and 2001: A Space Odyssey. The spacewalk scene on the Enterprise exterior was one of the most challenging sets to envision and construct for the film. The production had to design a spacesuit that looked practical rather than extravagant. Fans were built into the helmets so the actors would not overheat, and neon lights into the front so the occupant's face could be seen. When the actors first put on the helmets, the fully enclosed design made it hard to breathe. After a minute of wearing the suit, Stewart became ill and shooting was discontinued. The set for the ship's outer hull and deflector dish were built at Paramount's largest soundstage, surrounded by blue screens and rigged wires for the zero-gravity sequences. The stage was not large enough to accommodate a full-size replica of the Enterprise dish, so Zimmerman had to scale down the plans by 15%. The Starfleet uniforms were redesigned for the film by longtime Star Trek costumer Bob Blackman to give it a more militaristic feel, with gray padded shoulders, black torso, sleeves and leggings, and colored upper shirt striped cuffs. The new uniforms for this film were later adopted in the 5th season of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, but the crew on Star Trek Voyager continued to use the old DS9 uniforms due to being stuck in the Delta Quadrant. Since Blackman was also handling the costumes for the television series, non-Starfleet design clothes were delegated to Deborah Everton, a newcomer to Star Trek who was responsible for more than 800 costumes during production. Everton was tasked with updating the Borg costumes to something new, but reminiscent of the television series. The bulky suits were made more sleek and outfitted with fiber optic lights. The time travel aspect of the story also required period costumes to the mid-21st century and the 1940s Dixon Hill nightclub holodeck recreation. Everton and makeup designer Michael Westmore, Scott Wheeler, and Jake Garber wanted to upgrade the pasty white look the Borg had retained since the Next Generation's 2nd season, born out of a need for budget constraints of television design. I wanted it to look like they were assimilated or Borgified from the inside out rather than outside in. In the television series, much of the Borg faces were covered by a helmet, but for First Contact, the makeup artist removed the head covering and designed a simulated version of the familiar Star Trek aliens such as Klingons, Romulans, Bajorans, Cardassians. The Borg Queen was a challenge because she had to be unique among the Borg, but still retain human qualities. The final appearance involved a pale gray skin with elongated oval head with coils of wires rather than hair. The actress that played her recalled the first day she had her makeup applied, I saw everyone cringing and thought, great, they made this and they scared themselves. Casting for the part of the Borg Queen took time as the actress needed to be sexy, dangerous, and mysterious. Frakes cast Alice Krieger after finding that she had all the mentioned qualities and being impressed by her performance in Ghost Story. The director considered her the sexiest Star Trek villain of all time. James Cromwell as Zefram Cochrane. The character Zefram Cochrane had first appeared in the original series episode Metamorphosis, played by Glenn Corbett. Cromwell's Cochrane is much older and has no resemblance to Corbett, which didn't bother the writers. Although the character was written with Cromwell in mind, Tom Hanks, a big fan of Star Trek, was approached for the role by Paramount first, but he had already committed to another project and had to reject the part. Cromwell had a long previous association with Star Trek, having played characters on The Next Generation as well as a role in Deep Space Nine. Several of the Next Generation recurring characters also appeared in the film, including Dwight Schultz reprising his role as Lieutenant Reginald Barclay. The third draft of the script added cameos by two actors from the sister television series Voyager. Robert Picardo appeared as the Enterprise's EMH program. He won the cameo after suggesting to the producers that Enterprise should have the same technology as Voyager. Picardo's "I'm a doctor, not a doorstep" is a callback to the Star Trek original series character Dr. Leonard McCoy. Voyager actor Ethan Phillips, who played Neelix, cameos as the nightclub maitre d' in the holodeck scene. Principal photography took more leisurely pace than on The Next Generation because of the less hectic schedule. Only 4 pages of scripts had to be filmed each day, as opposed to the 8 on the television series. Since many new sets had to be created, the production commenced filming with location photography. 4 days were spent in the Titan Missile Museum in South Arizona. The disarmed nuclear missile was fitted with fiberglass capsule shell to stand in for Phoenix's booster and the command module. Old missile silo provided a large set that the budget would have to prohibit building from scratch, but the small size created difficulties. Each camera moved was planned in advance to work around the areas where lighting had to be added, and the electricians and grips had to use rock climbing harnesses to move up and down the shaft and attach lights. To complete the effect, shots from the Phoenix nose down and from the engine up were filmed with a 30mm lens to lengthen the missile. After the completion of the Phoenix shots, the crew moved to a 2-week nighttime shoot in Angeles National Forest. Zimmerman created a village of 14 huts to stand in for Montana. The cast enjoyed the scenes as a change to escape their uniforms and wear normal clothes. The last location shot was in an Art Deco restaurant in Los Angeles Union Station. The shoot used a 10-piece orchestra, 15 stuntmen, and 120 extras to fill the seats. Among the nightclub patrons were Braga, Moore, and film stunt coordinator Ronnie Rondell. After location shooting was complete, shooting on the new engineering set began May 3rd. The set lasted less than a day in pristine condition before it was Borgified. Next came the action sequence and the Battle of the Enterprise, a phase the filmmakers dubbed Borg Hell. Frakes directed the Borg scenes similar to a horror movie, creating as much suspense as possible. To balance these elements, he added more comedic elements to the Earth scenes, intended to monetarily relieve the audience of tension before building it up again. The last scene filmed was the film's first, Picard's Borg Nightmare. One camera began inside the iris of Picard's eyeball and pulled back to reveal the captain aboard a massive Borg ship. The shot continued to pull back and reveal the exterior of the Borg ship. The scene was inspired by New York's production of Sweeney Todd, The Demon Barber of Fleet Street, in which the stage surrounded the audience, giving the sense of realism. Principal photography finished shooting on July 2, 1996, 2 days over schedule, but still under budget. The majority of First Contact's effects were handled by Industrial Light and Magic under the supervision of John Knoll. Small effect sequences such as phaser fire, computer graphics, and transporter effects were delegated to a team led by visual effects specialist David Gamora. Most of the effects sequences were planned using low-res computer-generated animatics. This rough animation storyboard established length, action, and composition, allowing the producers and director to discern how the scenes would play out before they were shot. First Contact was the last film to feature a physical model of the Enterprise. For the ship's dramatic introduction, the effects team combined motion control shots of the Enterprise model and a computer-generated background. To create a turbulent look within the nebula, the particle render that ILM devised for an earlier tornado film, Twister, was used. For the Borg battle, Noel insisted on close-up shots that were near the alien vessel to be used with a physical model. To make the Borg vessel appear larger than it was, Noel made sure that an edge of it was facing the camera like the prow of a ship, and that the cube broke the edges of the frame. To give the cube greater depth and texture, Rosenberg shot the vessel with harsher light. The impact of the Federation weaponry on the Borg cube was simulated using a 60-inch model of the cube. The model had specific areas that could be blown up multiple times without damaging the miniature. The smaller Borg sphere was a 12-inch model, was shot separately from the cube and digitally added in post-production. The time travel vortex the sphere created was simulated with a rocket re-entry effect. Frakes considered the entrance of the Borg Queen with her head, shoulders, and steel spine lowered by cables and attaching to her body as the signature special effect in the film. The scene was difficult to execute, taking ILM 5 months to finish. They devised a rig that would lower the actress on the set and apply a prosthetic spine over a blue suit so ILM could remove her lower body. This strategy enabled the filmmakers to incorporate as many live-action elements as possible without resorting to further digital effects. The film composer Jerry Goldsmith scored First Contact, his third Star Trek feature. Goldsmith wrote a sweeping main theme which began with the Star Trek fanfare, the menacing march with touches of synthesizers which used to represent the Borg. 1996 marked the 30th anniversary of the Star Trek franchise. First Contact was heavily marketed, to an extent not seen since the release of Star Trek the Motion Picture in 1979. 2 making-of television specials premiered on HBO and the Sci-Fi Channel, as well as being promoted during the 30th anniversary television special on UPN. Paramount heavily marketed the film on the internet via the First Contact website, which averaged 4.4 million hits a week during the film's opening run, the largest amount of traffic ever on a motion picture site. First Contact opened in over 2,000 theaters beginning on November 22, 1996, grossing $30.7 million in its first week and making it the top movie at the US box office. Did I say November? November 22nd, 1996. Okay, so this film wasn't released in the summer, but it was still a blockbuster hit of 1996. The film went on to gross $77 million in the first 4 weeks, remaining in the top 10 box office during this time. It closed with a US and Canada gross of over $92 million and an international gross of $54 million, for a total of $146 million worldwide. Thank you for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed another journey to the final frontier, and we'll see you for the next one.